Hello, wonderful people. Does your paradigm turn on a dime? Okay, I know that's a really horrible rhyme / joke, but we're going to be talking about paradigms a bit. I'm not sure if you know what a paradigm is. Most people, I feel like, have some experience with the concept of a paradigm, but we're going to talk about that. And the whole reason we're talking about this is I've been getting a lot of questions lately from people that end up taking me down the path of explaining boundaries. And so I was like, oh, I'll do an episode about boundaries. That'll be awesome. I'll talk about healthy boundaries and yada, yada, yada. And then I realized, oh, wait. If you want to understand a boundary, you should probably understand the system you're applying it to. So we're going to talk about family systems and structures and how different types of family paradigms a bit so that we have context when it comes to understanding what a healthy boundary is. That said, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and this is Life of a Military Wife. Okay, so let's explore this whole concept of family paradigms. I feel like most people are at least familiar with or have heard the word paradigm before. And if you haven't, that's okay. We're going to talk about it. So, a paradigm is not just the lens or perspective in which you view the world, but it also informs your decisions and affects your method of interacting. So it's more than just perspective, but perspective is a huge part of it. Family paradigms are the method in which a family organizes themselves, or the structure in which they use to approach the world and function as a family. Okay, so with that framework in mind, let's discuss. There are 4 major or common family paradigms. And those are closed, open, random, and synchronous. Closed families are, as the analogy that was given to me, a castle. They have very defined structures on what is or is not acceptable, who is or is not a part of the family. They are very authoritarian sometimes. There is a very centralized form of leadership, and there is a huge emphasis on traditions and planning and things like that. I just imagine a castle with a moat and a drawbridge. It's just structured, very structured. And as I'm going to discuss with all of these, there is healthy and unhealthy. Like, what makes this healthy is that everyone buys into this system. Everyone genuinely feels like it is for their well-being, and they genuinely participate sincerely. That's what makes it healthy. So when you have a leader and everyone genuinely respects and looks up to that leader and wants to follow that leader, that's a positive situation. That's fine. It works. And that's why a closed system is perfectly functional. As long as, again, everybody genuinely is a willing participant in the system. Open family systems emphasize dialogue, communication, patience, and a willingness to change. There's a lot of adaptability and innovation, negotiation, and collaboration. And that's a whole lot of Asians in that whole thing. But basically what it is an open family system still has a lot of structure to it, but there's also a lot of flexibility. It's not just one leader leading the way. It's more of a collaborative effort where people have the right to agree to disagree and talk things out and figure things out, but there's still a lot of structure and cohesion. I like the way that it's kind of discussed. It's that basically it's a free sharing of information and ideas. People are welcome to come and participate and be part of the family system, even if they're not part of the family. And so yeah, it's very still organized, but it's a lot more open. Hence, open. Yeah, open paradigm. Um, the next one is random. And when I first encountered random and synchronous in my class, when we were talking about family systems and family paradigms, I was like, because it was such a foreign concept to me. I grew up with an extended family that was a very closed system. There was a defined set of leadership and traditions. We knew what was going to happen all the time. I mean, I always knew exactly what was going to happen for Christmas every single year. Whose house it was going to be at, what food we were going to have, what time we were going to get there, what was going to happen. Every single, extended family event was set in stone permanently. And there was a whole lot of comfort in that as a kid. I really didn't mind that at all. It took a lot of stress out of planning because we didn't have to plan. We already knew what the plan was. And I think that is one of the beauties of a closed system is the fact that everything's pretty much done. And so there's no reason to stress. And as a person who tends to get overly, I like it when things are planned. I don't like making all the decisions. I like just knowing what is expected of me. It's nice sometimes. And that said, I grew up in an immediate family that was far more of an open system, or at least became an open system as I got older. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But basically the whole point is I was familiar with a closed system and I was familiar with an open system, but I had never really thought about a random or synchronous. And so when my teacher was explaining random family paradigms to me, I quite literally thought he was like making it up. I'm like, how can anyone function like that? But people do, and I will explain how I know that later. But anyway, so a random family paradigm focuses on the present. Novelty, creativity, and individuality are highly valued, as well as flexibility with regard to traditions. The whole focus of a random family paradigm is that routines and boundaries and expectations are ever changing and malleable, that it is supporting individuals' pursuits of meeting their own needs, which is great. That sounds fine. But random families don't always sit down and have like family dinner together, and they don't always like do everything together. They're supportive of each other and they care about each other, but there's a whole variety in how things are handled. And again, if that works, if that's how your family functions, game, go for it. Synchronous families are ones that I really have not encountered very often. And I'll explain. I think you'll probably get it as I explain. But synchronous family paradigms emphasize harmony, tranquility, and mutual identification. There's a huge stress on being like, avoiding conflict, and it's a, just like the sense of unity, of consent, of agreement, harmony, balance. It's honestly, I just don't have a lot of experience with families like this. Again, sounds wonderful. I grew up in a family that really, agreed to disagree, and people didn't always have the same views, and we would argue sometimes. And so a family that just lives harmoniously and pursues their own development with no friction really just seems great, but not realistic, or at least not based on what I grew up with. But it is a possibility, and it really does exist. It made me think for a second of Little Women and the transcendence movement, and how Marmee is trying to teach their girls to be calm and passive, and well, not passive, but like not aggressive, not fighting, that violence was something they should avoid, which are great principles, but how Jo kind of struggles with it and feels kind of like a failure because she has a difficulty meeting this family ideal of this synchronous harmony, because her and Amy don't always get along. But how Beth really does fine in that system because it fits her temperament and personality. So that's one example I was able to think of. But it comes down to this, that how does this all apply to military life? And the issue is, whenever we have these systems that we are used to and familiar with, maybe we don't have any experience with another paradigm. Our paradigm is all we've got. Then you're thrown into the military, and it can be kind of a culture shock, because really, if you look at it, military culture is a closed paradigm. It really is. There is a clear chain of command. There is a clearly defined expectations, rules, guidelines that do not really bend a ton. It's just, it is the way it is, and you deal. And that can be really hard to adapt to if it's not a family paradigm system you're used to. If you are used to a closed system where you're used to not competing with another closed system that technically takes priority over your family's closed paradigm, then you might have issues where you want your soldier or airman or Marine or whatever home at a certain time so you can have family dinner every day. That's not a realistic expectation to have as a military family. Or how to handle them not being there for some family tradition like Christmas or anniversaries or birthdays. Having to be flexible and change those, it could be very stressful. If you are from a synchronous environment, I'm not even sure, no offense, I'm not even sure if the military would be the most enjoyable place for someone who is used to a synchronous paradigm, because the military can be kind of rough. But that said, an adaptation is definitely going to be significant. And so when those systems, external systems, impose themselves on the family system, there is a certain level of adaptation that's going to have to happen. And that's where the whole boundaries thing comes in, that we will talk about more later on. But basically, the other aspect I really wanted to talk about was paradigm shifts. And there is a story that Stephen Covey, who does 7 Habits, uses in his book, and I've heard a couple other times, about what a paradigm shift is. And it's a really good experience for him. But he was on the subway, and there was a man, he came in with his kids, and the kids were all over the place and just completely out of control and unruly and disturbing everyone on the train. People were kind of getting grumpy about these kids that were just wild and out of control. And finally, he said something to the dad. He's like, "Hey, what's going on?" And the dad apologizes and points out that his wife just passed away and he doesn't know how to tell the kids. And immediately, his whole perspective on the situation changed. Instead of him looking at this guy as some neglectful or absent-minded father who doesn't care about properly raising his children. He is able to see this man's situation for what it is. He's going through a significant crisis and he doesn't know what to do. And so it changes the way he looks at things. And that is really what a paradigm shift is. A paradigm shift is when your paradigm or your view, perspective on the world, your patterns or models, the way you perceive things change. And it can happen quickly, like in this case, or it can happen gradually over time. An example of kind of a quick paradigm shift that has to happen sometimes when it comes to family paradigms is when you get married or join the military. That can constitute for a huge paradigm shift because you have to come up with a new way of handling things. When you get married, for example, my husband grew up in a random family paradigm, and I grew up in a more open family paradigm by the time we met. And our family paradigm had shifted, immediate family paradigm had shifted from closed to open as we got older. We were allowed as kids more say in decision making, what we had for dinner, vacation plans, things like that. Still very much mom was in charge, but we had some impact on things. And so it shifted. But that's what I was used to. And then I met my in-laws. And their family functions just fine as a random family. It works for them. They had 2 working parents with lots of kids that had jobs or responsibilities or extracurricular things. And so everyone was going and coming and doing what they needed to do. They all love and support each other. They're genuinely there for each other. But it's just not as organized as what I grew up with. And that threw me for a loop. It really did. And so when my husband and I first got married, there were some significant struggles because I was used to, if everyone was home, and stuff happened, but if everyone was home, you sat down and you ate together. You ate dinner together as much as possible, every night if possible. My husband would come home and he would just get himself something to eat and start eating dinner and not even think to wait for me or that I might want to join him or whatever. And that was a foreign concept for me. I wasn't used to eating by myself with someone else in the house. Like if you're all there together, you eat together. So that was a conversation we had to have. And then we had our first Christmas together, and oh my word, did we learn a lot. Well, I learned a lot. My husband's really go with the flow. But my family, everyone has a say. We all discuss it. We come up with plans, and then the plan is the plan. And unless literally you are in the hospital or incapacitated, if we agree to be somewhere and do something together, then we're there and we do it. That's how it works. There is a level of commitment and follow through that is just, expected. And it's not a restrictive sort of thing. It's just kind of the way we function, which is fine. So we had agreed to go Christmas caroling, and we had set a day and a time to do it. And I had let my in-laws know, hey, I'm going Christmas caroling with my family, and we're doing it from this day, from this time to this time. And my mother-in-law's like, oh, that sounds like a wonderful idea. We should do that too. And I'm like, oh, okay, you guys want to do that too? She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, when do you want to do it? And I talked to her a month in advance. And she's like, oh, we'll do it on this day at this time. Well, gets closer and we're in town and she's like, oh, actually, that's not going to work anymore. So we're going to do this day and this time. Well, it ends up getting switched to the same day, almost the same time that my family had already agreed to. And I had a complete panic attack I was so stressed out because I didn't want to let anyone down, and I didn't know how we were going to accomplish both of them. And I just was stressed, super stressed out. And I anyway, we get there to where my in-laws are, and we're going to be late getting to my family. But I didn't want to miss. And so we show up and we get there and no one's there. So I ask my mother-in-law, I'm like, where is everyone? She's like, oh, well, it didn't work out for them, so they're not coming. What? I was like, whoa. That's an option? It hadn't even occurred to me that just not being able to participate was a possibility. It just didn't compute in my head. I still have sometimes a hard time with that concept. And I was floored and kind of frustrated and really, really confused because we had made a commitment. Why aren't they here? And it took a while for me to wrap my brain around that one. But honestly, I am really grateful for my in-laws and their go with the flow, take it easy mentality. It's taken a lot of adjustment, because it's just not how I'm used to thinking. But being able to say no and just not show up if I don't feel like it the day of, there's times that's kind of nice. And so there's aspects of all these systems that different people and different families are going to use and utilize. And there are pure examples of each of these family paradigms, but there's also combinations too. So that said, with the whole paradigm shift, when you get into the military or you have any other external paradigm influencing your family paradigm, you'll have to come up with ways to compensate. One way I've had to learn to adapt, again, it comes from this whole sense of you do it together. There's a structure. Family vacation should have the whole family. So for the first few years, I didn't go anywhere or do anything unless my husband was home. I wouldn't go over to a friend's house for dinner. I wouldn't go on a family vacation. I wouldn't have a birthday party for a kid if my husband wasn't home. And it finally became just untenable. It just was not functioning because I could not delay or cancel things indefinitely with little children around who are expecting to be able to do them just because daddy wasn't home to be a part of it and I didn't want him to miss out. And so we had to come up with another way to compensate. And that has turned into going on family vacations without him sometimes. Or we'll have dinner together as a family and daddy will eat dinner when he gets home. Or we will do holiday or birthday celebrations before or after he gets back, depending on what it is. Or we'll have 2 Christmases. That's a fun concept for kids, 2 Christmases. Or we have different types of birthday party celebrations based on if daddy's in town or daddy's not in town. So if daddy's away, instead of me throwing a birthday party and being stressed out trying to host a whole bunch of kids and myself, we do an adventure instead. So the kids can pick an experience like going to the zoo or bowling or whatnot with a friend. And we do that as a family with their one friend, and that's their birthday celebration instead of having a party. So we have found different ways of adapting and coming up with these systems because you know what? The military can't tell us not to go home for Christmas. They can say, Daddy can't come with us, which has happened. But they can't tell you that you can't go on vacation or do all these other things. And so, yeah, there's things my husband has had to miss out on. But we still can build those memories and have those traditions. And when Daddy gets back, we'll do stuff with Daddy. So we've had to adapt. And in all honesty, that's really one of the biggest keys. It's hard to adapt your family paradigm if you don't know what your family paradigm is. And understanding that there are other ways of looking at the world and these structures can help you have that paradigm shift. So maybe you are a closed family system when Daddy is home. When Daddy is home, it's family first, and family time comes first, and friends and other things can wait, and we do everything we can together. And when Daddy's home, it's a closed system, and the family is just solid. But when Daddy's gone, maybe we do things differently, and maybe we're a little bit more of an open system, and we will do more stuff with friends. We'll have dinner with other people. So you can adapt that, but knowing that there are ways to adapt, there are ways to change, there are different ways to look at it, helps. And that's one reason why I wanted to talk about these family paradigms. I had no idea random was a thing until that class and then meeting my in-laws. But you know what? I am so grateful for what they taught me, because their encouragement to pursue my individual needs and goals and development has helped me become a better person. I will admit we are more of an open than random family. Random still stresses me out a little bit, but I have learned a lot from my in-laws, and I really appreciate that. Because there are times where you just need to chill. There are times where it's okay not to plan everything. In fact, there are times where it's better to not have a plan. And I never, ever even would have considered that before I met them. But I have learned to really enjoy vacations where I plan nothing now, where literally the only goal is to be together. So it's something to think about. And as we kind of go down this road again next week, I want to talk more about boundaries next week. Now that we have a better concept of what the structure and organization of families' paradigms are, it's going to be easier to understand boundaries and setting those boundaries and making them healthy and functional. So I hope you enjoyed this. I really actually had a lot of fun, again, going through my textbooks like the nerd I am, and I really love this whole concept. Ironically enough, I was discussing it with my sister-in-law at the last family reunion, and I told her about the fact that they were random and all this, and I'm glad I knew that that was normal and fine before I met them, because it helped. And she looked it up, and she came to me the next day. She's like, I looked that up. You're right, that is totally us. So, I don't know, have fun, look it up. Delve in, figure out what your family system, family paradigm is, and let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and this is Life of a Military Wife.